Has humanity always been this cruel? This video does not judge humanity. It tries to understand it. This video does not judge humanity. It tries to understand it. In every era of human history, the same question is born again. Have we always been this cruel? Or are we simply seeing it more clearly now? Where does cruelty come from? And why does it never fully leave us? This video will not answer these questions. It will simply think with you. Sometimes, when the night is quiet, when everyone else is asleep, when the noise fades, when the screen goes dark, one question remains, silent but heavy. Has humanity always been this cruel? We usually ask this question in anger, when we see war, when we see violence, when we read the news. But this video does not ask it in anger. This video does not accuse. It does not point fingers. It does not pass judgment. This video simply pauses and thinks. When we look at history, we often say one thing: how could they be so brutal? But we rarely ask, what did they feel? What were they afraid of? What were they about to lose? Because asking questions takes courage. Judging is easier. In this video, we will not defend humanity, but we will not condemn it either, because humanity is not a verdict. It is a process. Imagine a human being thousands of years ago. There is hunger, there is cold, there is fear, and standing in front of them is another human being, also afraid, also hungry. At that moment, does cruelty begin, or is it simply survival? Today, sitting comfortably in our chairs, we look at the past and say, if it were us, we wouldn't do that. But history is a mirror. It does not show us at our most comfortable. It shows us at the edge of hunger, at the edge of fear, at the edge of obedience. And at that edge, we all start to look disturbingly similar. This video asks, is humanity cruel because it is evil or because it is afraid? Does humanity stay silent because it is heartless or because it fears standing alone? History shows us countless scenes, moments where humans killed one another, executions cheered by crowds, cruelty accepted as normal. But history never says, look, these people were evil. History simply says, look, these were humans. And perhaps that is what truly unsettles us, because it means cruelty is not foreign. It is not a distant monster. It is one of the possibilities that lives within us. This video is not here to scare you. It is not here to accuse you. It is not even here to wake you up. This video simply wants to sit beside you and look at history together, quietly. Maybe humanity was not always cruel. Maybe it was always fragile. Maybe cruelty is not always a choice. Sometimes it is a consequence of fear, a consequence of hunger, a consequence of obedience. This video will not give answers, because some questions do not exist to be answered. They exist to be thought about. If this question unsettles you, if you are watching not to be right, but to understand, then you are in the right place. This is not the trial of humanity. This is its story. And now, let us ask where that story truly begins. Where does cruelty come from? And why does it never fully leave us? Cruelty does not come from a single place. It does not arrive from the outside. It seems to be born alongside humanity itself, not as evil, but as a sense of threat. When humans are afraid, they change. When they feel hunger, they narrow. When they face isolation, they harden. Cruelty is often born not from hatred, but from fear. History shows us that humans are most cruel when they believe something vital is at risk, when land is threatened, when children must be protected, when identity feels fragile, when survival feels uncertain. In these moments, mercy weakens, not because it disappears, but because mercy requires safety. Cruelty, on the other hand, demands immediate action. Cruelty never fully leaves us because its causes never fully leave us. Fear still exists. Hunger still returns, sometimes under different names. Obedience is still offered as comfort. Only the form changes. Once it was a blade, then it became a bullet. Now it is a button, a screen, a distance, but the feeling remains the same. Perhaps cruelty is not humanity's dark side. Perhaps it is its breaking point. The moment when fear overwhelms thought, when survival silences conscience. History could not erase cruelty. Religion tried to restrain it. Law attempted to contain it. None succeeded completely, because cruelty is not an enemy. It is a signal, a reminder of how fragile humans truly are. So perhaps the real question is not, why does cruelty exist? But rather, under what conditions do we awaken it? Cruelty was not born as evil. It was born as a mechanism of survival. Before morality had a name, before laws were written, before mercy became a virtue, there was hunger, there was cold, there was fear. And fear does not ask what is right. It asks what is necessary. In the earliest moments of human existence, cruelty was not a choice made from hatred, but a reflex born from danger. To hesitate meant to die. To soften meant to disappear. To survive meant to harden. What we now call cruelty was once instinct. What we now condemn was once protection. In a world where resources were scarce, where night carried predators and strangers meant threat, harshness was not immorality, it was awareness. The hand that struck first was not cruel in intention, it was afraid of being struck. Only much later did humanity begin to ask not just how do we survive, but how should we live? Only then did cruelty gain a moral weight. Only then did it become something to judge. But its roots were already deep, planted long before judgment existed. This is why cruelty never fully disappears, because it was never merely a flaw. It was once a function. Long before cities, before borders, before history had names, there were only small groups of humans moving through an unforgiving world. They did not build, they did not store, they did not plan for generations ahead. They followed food, they followed seasons, they followed survival. This was the hunter-gatherer world. Life in this world was not brutal by choice, it was brutal by necessity. Food was never guaranteed. One failed hunt could mean starvation. One harsh winter could erase an entire group. There were no reserves, no safety nets, no second chances. In such a world, every decision carried weight. Not moral weight, but existential weight. Resources were limited, game animals migrated, fruits appeared and vanished with seasons. Water sources dried, and when resources shrink, competition begins. Not because humans desired violence, but because survival demanded it. Imagine a small group, a few adults, children, the elderly. They depend entirely on what the hunters bring back. Now imagine another group, arriving at the same river, the same hunting ground, the same herd. This encounter is not philosophical, it is immediate. There is no time to debate ethics, no room for mercy as an abstract idea. There is only one question: who will eat tonight? In this world, killing another human being was not seen as murder in the modern sense. It was often understood as protection, protection of food, protection of territory, protection of the group. To eliminate a rival was to increase the chances that your children would live. This is difficult to accept from a modern perspective. Today we associate killing with cruelty, with moral failure, with evil. But for early humans, the equation was painfully simple. The death of the other meant the survival of the family. There was no state to enforce peace, no law to mediate conflict, no shared moral framework between distant groups. Trust rarely extended beyond the tribe. Anyone outside was not another human first. They were a potential threat. Anthropological evidence suggests that early human groups were deeply cooperative internally and deeply suspicious externally. Within the group, sharing, protection, care. Outside the group, caution, defense, aggression. Cruelty was not universal. It was selective, and that selectivity mattered. Violence was not constant, but it was always possible, and the possibility alone shaped behavior. Weapons were not symbols of power, they were tools of assurance. A spear was not dominance, it was insurance against extinction. Over time, patterns formed. Groups that defended resources survived. Groups that failed to protect territory vanished, not because they were kinder, but because kindness alone was not enough to endure scarcity. Nature did not reward morality, it rewarded adaptation. This is where a critical truth emerges. Cruelty did not evolve because humans loved violence. It evolved because it worked. It kept groups alive long enough to reproduce, to pass on genes, to continue the species. And here lies the uncomfortable realization. Modern humans are descendants of those who survived these conditions. Not the most moral, not the most compassionate, but the most adaptable. This does not mean early humans were heartless creatures. They mourned their dead. They cared for the injured. They formed bonds. But those bonds were protected fiercely. And when forced to choose between us and them, the answer was rarely unclear. Only much later, when agriculture created surplus, when settlements reduced constant movement, when food could be stored, did humanity gain something new? Time. Time to reflect, time to judge, time to develop morality beyond survival. But cruelty did not disappear, because it was never simply a behavior. It was a memory written into human experience, a response learned in a world where hesitation meant death. This is why cruelty feels ancient, because it is. It was shaped long before laws, long before religion, long before the idea of good and evil. And as we move forward in this story, we will see how humanity tried to restrain what once saved it by building rules, beliefs, and civilizations. But the instinct itself never fully vanished. Morality was not always part of the human story, at least not in the way we understand it today. It did not come before survival. It did not come before fear. It did not come before scarcity. Morality arrived after conditions changed, and the name of that condition is simple: fullness. Where there is hunger, choice collapses, and where choice collapses, morality falls silent. This does not mean humans were evil, it means humans were limited. Today, we often speak of morality as if it were a permanent human trait, as if humans have always chosen between right and wrong. But history tells a different story. For much of human existence, the choice was not between good and evil, but between survival and disappearance. Hunger is not an idea. It is not an opinion. It is not an argument. Hunger is pressure, and under pressure, morality becomes a luxury. Think of a starving child. Does that child weigh ethical principles? No. There is only one reality: food. Now place that child thousands of years in the past, inside a fragile tribe, in the middle of winter. Where does morality stand there? Morality requires time, it requires reflection, it requires alternatives. Hunger allows none of these. Hunger says now. This may be why morality appears late in history. First, there is hunting, then fear, then death. Only later do we see surplus, storage, rules, and only after that do humans begin to say, this is right, this is wrong. Morality is not an invention of the starving. It is the reflection of the fed. This may sound uncomfortable, but history whispers it again and again. The earliest moral systems emerge only when resources exceed immediate need. Agriculture, preservation, reserves. In other words, tomorrow exists. When tomorrow exists, today's actions can be judged. When tomorrow does not exist, today is everything. This brings us to a difficult question. If morality is born after fullness, what are the actions taken in hunger? Are they evil or are they instinct? We often say they were cruel, but perhaps the more honest question is they were hungry. History is filled with violence, but much of it predates ideology. Ideology comes later. First comes hunger. First comes fear. First comes the threat of extinction. Humans are not always cruel. Humans are often cornered, and a cornered being chooses the shortest path. Morality is the longer path. This is not an attempt to excuse cruelty. It is an attempt to understand it. Because what we fail to understand, we are more likely to repeat. If we reduce cruelty to evil, if we assign it only to others, we forget something essential. Under the same conditions, we might not be different. Perhaps this is the most unsettling thought of all. Cruelty is not foreign, it is potential, a possibility that awakens when circumstances collapse. And so the question returns, not as an accusation, but as a reflection. Was humanity cruel, or was it hungry? This question may never have a final answer, but asking it matters, because morality does not only explain the past, it helps us recognize the present. The arrival of agriculture did not end violence, but it changed its shape. For the first time in human history, food could be stored, land could be claimed, life could be planned beyond tomorrow. And with this shift, human morality began to transform. Before agriculture, survival was immediate. You ate what you found. You moved when resources disappeared. Conflict was brief, personal, and temporary, but agriculture rooted humans to the land. And once humans stayed in one place, everything changed. Land became valuable, not because it could be eaten immediately, but because it promised future survival. And anything that promises the future also invites conflict. With settled life came ownership. This land is mine. This field feeds my children. This harvest belongs to us. And once ownership exists, violence becomes defensive. Not about hunger anymore, but about protection. Morality evolves in this moment, not as universal compassion, but as rules. Rules about who belongs. Rules about who owns. Rules about who may take and who may not. Agriculture creates surplus. Surplus creates inequality. Some store more, some store less. Some control distribution. And where inequality appears, new moral questions emerge. Who deserves food? Who deserves protection? Who deserves punishment? Violence no longer disappears in winter. It becomes organized. Walls are built. Weapons are refined. Guards are assigned. Cruelty is no longer spontaneous. It becomes systematic. This is a crucial turning point. Before agriculture, violence was often reactive. After agriculture, it becomes institutional, no longer just an instinct, but a structure. Morality follows this transformation. What is right is no longer defined only by survival, but by order, by stability, by predictability. Morality becomes a tool to maintain society. This is why early moral systems often focus less on compassion and more on obedience. Honor authority, respect boundaries, accept punishment, because order is fragile and fear of disorder is powerful. Punishment becomes public, not only to correct behavior, but to demonstrate consequences. Violence becomes symbolic, a message. This is what happens when rules are broken. At the same time, something new also appears: long-term responsibility. Parents plan for children they have not yet raised. Communities care for elders. Traditions form. This is where morality deepens, but it also narrows. Compassion expands inside the community. Suspicion grows outside it. The moral circle is drawn carefully. Inside the walls, obligation. Outside the walls, threat. Agriculture allows humans to think about justice, but it also allows them to justify cruelty. because when something is built, it must be defended. And defense easily becomes aggression. This is how violence gains legitimacy. No longer I kill because I am hungry, but I punish because it is necessary. I conquer because it is justified. I destroy because it preserves order. Morality, at this stage, does not eliminate cruelty. It reframes it. Cruelty becomes duty. Violence becomes law. Fear becomes structure. This is not a moral failure. It is a historical consequence. Complex societies require control. Control requires enforcement. Enforcement often requires force. And yet, something important changes. Humans begin to feel guilt. Before, death was survival. Now, death carries meaning. Judgment appears. Shame appears. Responsibility appears. Agriculture gives humanity time. Time to reflect. Time to regret. Time to ask questions beyond survival. But it also gives humanity something dangerous. The belief that violence can be managed. From this moment on, cruelty is no longer accidental. It is planned, organized, defended by logic. And this is why violence in later civilizations feels colder, less desperate, more deliberate, less about hunger, more about power. Morality and violence did not separate after agriculture. They grew together, entangled. Morality trying to restrain violence, violence shaping morality's limits. This is the world that follows survival. Not peaceful, but stable. Not compassionate, but ordered. And as humanity moves forward from this point into kingdoms, empires, and laws, the question changes. No longer how do we survive, but who decides what is right? Mesopotamia, order born from chaos. Mesopotamia was not born in peace. It was born between two unpredictable rivers. The Tigris and the Euphrates gave life, but they also destroyed without warning. Floods could nourish crops one year and erase entire settlements the next. Survival here demanded coordination. For the first time, humans could not survive as isolated families or wandering groups. They needed schedules, irrigation systems, shared labor, and where coordination appears, authority follows. Early Mesopotamian states did not emerge to protect kindness. They emerged to manage risk. Who controls the water? Who decides when to plant? Who distributes grain after harvest? These questions were not moral, they were existential. Violence in early Mesopotamia was not chaotic cruelty, it was administrative. Punishment existed to enforce order. Fear existed to maintain predictability. The first laws were not about compassion, they were about stability. The state becomes a referee in a fragile environment, but referees need power, and power needs enforcement. This is where cruelty changes form. No longer personal revenge, but legal consequence. No longer instinct, but decree. The state does not ask if violence is good. It asks if violence is useful. In Mesopotamia, morality is born as obedience to structure. Justice means order. Order means survival, and survival justifies force. This is not tyranny in the modern sense. It is adaptation, a society learning that chaos kills faster than cruelty. Ancient Egypt, cosmic order and sacred authority. Egypt's state did not grow from fear alone. It grew from certainty. The Nile flooded predictably. The land renewed itself. Unlike Mesopotamia's chaos, Egypt offered rhythm, and rhythm creates belief. The Egyptian state framed itself not as a manager of survival, but as a guardian of cosmic balance. Ma'at, order, harmony, balance. Violence here was not random, it was sacred. The pharaoh was not just a ruler, he was a bridge between humans and gods. To obey the state was to obey the universe itself. In such a system, cruelty becomes righteous. Punishment is not personal, it is divine correction. Disobedience is not rebellion, it is cosmic disruption. Egyptian morality emphasized stability, not equality. Hierarchy was natural, suffering was accepted. because order mattered more than fairness. Violence existed, but it was wrapped in ritual. Execution was not spectacle, it was necessity. The state did not apologize for force, it sanctified it. In Egypt, morality does not fight cruelty, it absorbs it. Cruelty becomes destiny, authority becomes sacred. 3. Assyria, terror as policy. Assyria does not hide its violence, it documents it, carves it in stone, displays it proudly. The Assyrian state understood something clearly. Fear works. Surrounded by rivals, lacking natural defenses, Assyria chose intimidation as survival strategy, not mercy, not diplomacy, terror. Violence here is not reactive, it is preventive. Cities are destroyed not because they resist, but so others will not try. Assyrian cruelty is deliberate, theatrical, mutilation, deportation, public punishment, not chaos. Communication, the message is simple. Resistance is pointless. In Assyria, morality does not soften violence, it celebrates it. Strength is virtue. Mercy is weakness. The state defines goodness as loyalty to power. This is one of history's clearest examples of cruelty becoming ideology, not instinct, not fear, strategy, and for a time, it works. Assyria dominates, Assyria expands, until fear breeds hatred, and hatred breeds collapse. 4. Ancient Rome, law, spectacle, and normalized cruelty. Rome does something different. It legalizes violence. Roman power does not rely solely on terror. It relies on law, but law backed by force. The Roman state understands that people obey longer when they believe the system is fair, even when it kills. Punishment becomes public spectacle, not just to harm, but to teach. The Colosseum is not entertainment, it is education. This is what power looks like. This is what disobedience costs. Rome turns cruelty into routine, execution schedules, legal classifications of death. Violence is bureaucratic. Roman morality emphasizes order, citizenship, duty. Cruelty is not framed as evil. It is framed as necessary for peace, for stability, for empire. What makes Rome unique is not how much violence it uses, but how normal it makes it. Cruelty becomes background noise. And this is perhaps the most enduring legacy. When violence is lawful, it stops feeling violent. Across these civilizations, cruelty does not disappear. It evolves from survival to law to sacred duty to spectacle. The state does not erase cruelty, it organizes it. And as states grow more complex, so do the justifications. Law did not emerge because humans suddenly became moral. It emerged because humans became many. When communities were small, rules were remembered. Conflicts were personal. Punishment was immediate and informal. But when societies grew, memory was no longer enough. Order needed structure, structure needed authority, and authority needed enforcement. This is where law is born. Law is often presented as the opposite of violence, as civilizations triumph over cruelty. But history tells a more complicated story. Law does not replace violence, it redirects it. Before law, violence was chaotic, unpredictable, personal. After law, violence becomes selective. Not everyone may punish. Not every action deserves retaliation. Only the authority decides. This is the first philosophical shift. Violence is no longer a personal right. It becomes a monopoly. The state claims it. Why does society accept this? Because unregulated violence destroys trust, and without trust, no society survives. Law promises something crucial: predictability. Punishment is not designed first to be fair. It is designed to be effective, to stop cycles of revenge, to prevent escalation, to keep violence contained. This is why early laws feel harsh. They are not concerned with inner intention. They care about consequences. An eye for an eye was not cruelty, it was limitation. It said, no more than this. No endless retaliation. Philosophically, Punishment serves three functions: deterrence, correction, demonstration. And often, demonstration is the most important. Public punishment is not only about the offender, it is about the observer. It tells society, this boundary exists, and crossing it has a cost. This is why punishment becomes ritualized, executed in public squares, written in stone, repeated in procedure. Violence becomes symbolic. Law teaches through fear long before it teaches through reason. But here lies the central paradox. Law seeks order, yet it is enforced through controlled cruelty. The state says, do not kill, and then it kills. Do not harm, and then it harms. This contradiction is not accidental, it is structural. The philosopher's question is not, is this hypocrisy, but why does society accept it? Because punishment reassures. It reassures those who obey that the rules matter. It reassures the powerful that stability can be maintained. And it reassures the fearful that chaos is being held back. In this sense, punishment is not about justice. It is about anxiety management. Societies fear collapse more than injustice, and punishment is the visible proof that collapse is being resisted. This is why laws often protect order before they protect individuals, why property is guarded before dignity, why rebellion is punished harder than cruelty. Punishment draws the line between acceptable and unacceptable behavior. But who draws the line? This is where philosophy becomes uncomfortable, because law is not neutral. It reflects power. Those who write the law define what deserves punishment. Throughout history, acts labeled criminal often threatened authority, not morality. Disobedience, heresy, dissent. Cruelty committed by power is rarely punished as cruelty. So punishment becomes selective morality, not what is wrong, but what is dangerous. This does not mean law is evil. It means law is pragmatic. Its first loyalty is to survival of the system. As societies grow more complex, punishment becomes less visible. No longer public executions, but prisons. No longer spectacle, but isolation. Cruelty becomes quieter, more bureaucratic, more distant. But distance does not erase it, it simply hides it. Philosophically, this raises a final question. If punishment is necessary for order, but cruelty is necessary for punishment, is cruelty an accident of law or its foundation? History suggests this answer. Law is humanity's attempt to live with its own capacity for violence, not to eliminate it, but to regulate it. This is why punishment never disappears. It evolves, from physical pain to loss of freedom, from spectacle to silence, from blood to time. And yet, the logic remains the same. Break the rule, lose something essential. Law does not ask humans to be good. It asks them to be predictable. Morality asks more, but morality comes later. This is why law feels cold, because it must be. Empathy is unstable, rules are not. And perhaps this is the final tension at the heart of civilization. We want justice to be humane, but we want order to be absolute. And absolute order always carries the shadow of cruelty. Law did not civilize violence, it gave it a uniform. Civilization did not erase cruelty, it organized it. It did not silence violence, it placed it on a stage. As societies grew larger, punishment could no longer be private. A hidden punishment teaches nothing. An unseen consequence inspires no fear. And fear, more than reason, was the earliest language of order. This is where public executions emerge. Not in secret rooms, not behind closed doors, but in squares, on platforms, before crowds. Execution was never only about the condemned. It was about everyone watching. The body on display was a message. This is what happens when the line is crossed. This is the cost of disobedience. This is the power of the state. Punishment becomes performance, ritualized, timed, witnessed. The crowd gathers not out of cruelty alone, but out of instruction. They are there to learn. the scream, the blood, the silence afterward. These were not accidents, they were tools. Because early states understood something clearly. Fear travels faster than law books. When punishment is visible, rules do not need to be explained. They are felt. This is why execution grounds often resembled theaters. Elevated platforms, clear sightlines, a defined beginning and end. Justice was not whispered, it was performed. In this system, punishment becomes more than correction. It becomes education. The state does not need to punish everyone. It only needs to punish one so that thousands remember. Here, cruelty is no longer chaotic, it is purposeful. This leads to a powerful equation. Punishment becomes spectacle. Spectacle produces fear. Fear produces order. Fear simplifies morality. You do not need to understand the rule if you fear the consequence. This is why early civilizations did not rely on empathy to maintain peace. Empathy is unstable. Fear is reliable. Public executions transform violence into a shared experience. The crowd becomes complicit. By watching, they accept. By accepting, they normalize. Cruelty stops being shocking. It becomes familiar, routine. This is perhaps the most important transformation. When cruelty becomes familiar, it no longer feels cruel. Civilization did not ask, "Is this too much?" It asked, "Does this work?" And for centuries, it did. But there is a deeper philosophical consequence. When punishment is public, violence stops feeling personal. No one in the crowd is responsible. The state did it. The law demanded it. Order required it. Responsibility dissolves into structure. This is how cruelty survives civilization, not as rage, but as procedure. A sword raised in anger is condemned. A sword raised in the name of law is accepted. Here lies the uncomfortable truth. The same act, killing, changes meaning based on who performs it and why. Civilization reframes cruelty. It no longer calls it violence, it calls it justice. This does not mean civilization failed. It means civilization made a choice. Chaos kills societies quickly. Controlled cruelty preserves them longer. So civilization chooses form over elimination, rules over instincts, spectacle over randomness. And in doing so, it teaches generations something subtle. Order is more important than mercy. Stability is more valuable than compassion. This lesson lingers. Even when executions move behind walls, even when blood disappears from public view, the logic remains. Fear continues to maintain order. Only the stage changes. Once it was the square, now it is the prison, the sentence, the invisible threat of exclusion. But the foundation is the same. Civilization did not end cruelty, it refined it. It dressed it in ceremony, wrapped it in language, justified it with necessity. And perhaps this is the most unsettling realization of all. The more civilized a society becomes, the quieter its cruelty grows, but never its absence. Because cruelty was never removed, it was given shape. If compassion were truly natural, it would not need instruction. If mercy flowed instinctively, it would not require repetition. And yet, throughout history, mercy does not appear as a suggestion. It appears as a command. Do not kill. Do not harm. Forgive. Love your neighbor. Show mercy. These are not observations. They are orders. This raises an unsettling question. Why does humanity need to be told to do what is supposedly in its nature? The answer may lie not in what humans are capable of, but in when they are capable of it. Compassion exists in humans, but it is fragile. It flourishes in safety. It weakens under threat. It retreats in fear. History shows us this clearly. In times of abundance, mercy feels natural. In times of scarcity, it feels dangerous. This is why compassion needed reinforcement, not because it was false, but because it was conditional. Religious and moral systems did not invent mercy. They protected it. They emerged in societies where violence had already become normalized, where punishment was public, where fear maintained order, where cruelty had structure. In such worlds, mercy was not intuitive. It was countercultural. To forgive an enemy was to risk survival. To show mercy was to appear weak. To refuse revenge was to disrupt expectation. So compassion had to be elevated, sanctified, commanded, repeated. Religion steps into this space not as a replacement for law, but as its moral tension. Law says, obey or suffer. Religion says, restrain yourself even when you can punish. This is not softness, it is discipline. Mercy becomes an act of resistance against instinct, against fear, against the logic of retaliation. That is why it requires command, because instinct does not naturally choose mercy when survival feels threatened. Notice how moral teachings do not appear in eras of comfort. They appear in eras of conflict. When empires rise, when inequality grows, when violence becomes routine, mercy enters history as a correction, a reminder, a counterweight. But even then, it is not unconditional. Mercy is often limited to your own group, your own faith, your own community. Because compassion expands slowly, fear expands quickly. This reveals a deeper truth. Humans are capable of mercy, but not consistently, not universally, not without effort. So mercy is taught, rehearsed, enforced as ideal. It is written into texts because it cannot be relied upon in moments of crisis. And this is why moral commandments are repetitive, not because humans forget the words, but because they forget the feeling. The command to be merciful exists because cruelty is easier, faster, more instinctive. Revenge satisfies immediately. Mercy asks for patience. Fear demands reaction. Compassion demands restraint. This is why mercy becomes sacred, because it goes against the current. But there is another uncomfortable layer. Mercy is commanded not only to protect victims, but to protect society from itself. Unchecked cruelty destroys trust. Unchecked revenge escalates endlessly. Mercy interrupts the cycle. So mercy is not only moral, it is practical. Yet, commanding mercy does not guarantee it. History is filled with commandments written in blood-stained eras. This is the paradox. The louder mercy is preached, the more violence is usually present. Because mercy becomes most necessary when it is least natural. So perhaps the question is not whether humans are merciful by nature. Perhaps the question is, under what conditions can mercy survive? Safety, stability, distance from fear. When those vanish, mercy retreats, and command takes its place. This does not make humanity evil. It makes humanity fragile. Mercy is not proof of our goodness. It is proof of our struggle. And the fact that we continue to command it, century after century, suggests something profound. We have never stopped needing the reminder, because compassion is not humanity's default. It is humanity's aspiration, and aspirations must be taught, repeated, defended. This is why mercy entered history not as a feeling, but as a law written into conscience, not because humans lacked mercy, but because they could not always afford it. Religion enters history speaking the language of mercy. It tells humans to forgive, to restrain themselves, to love beyond instinct. And yet, history records something unsettling. Some of the bloodiest conflicts were fought in religion's name. This is not a contradiction to be dismissed. It is a paradox to be understood. Religion did not emerge in peaceful worlds. It emerged in violent ones. Societies where fear already ruled, where punishment was public, where cruelty had become routine. Religion steps into this reality not to deny violence, but to reframe it. At its core, religion offers restraint. Do not kill without cause. Do not take revenge endlessly. Do not let instinct rule unchecked. But restraint has limits. When survival feels threatened, even mercy becomes conditional. This is where the idea of holy violence appears. Violence not as chaos, but as duty, not as hatred, but as obedience. Holy war does not arise because religion abandons mercy. It arises because religion prioritizes meaning. If violence can be framed as sacred, then it no longer feels like cruelty. It feels like necessity. This is the crucial shift. Religion does not always eliminate violence. Sometimes it justifies it. But why? Because religion does something powerful. It divides the world into moral space, believer and non-believer, sacred and profane, chosen and outsider. Once the moral circle is drawn, mercy flows freely inside it. But beyond that circle, mercy becomes optional. This is not unique to one faith. It appears across civilizations and eras. Mercy is preached universally, but applied selectively. Holy war emerges when violence is framed as defense of the sacred, of land, of belief, of divine order. In these moments, killing is no longer personal, it is sacramental. This removes a heavy burden from the individual conscience. The responsibility is transferred to God, to destiny, to higher command. This is why religious violence often feels calmer than personal revenge, less emotional, more certain. The believer is not acting from anger, but from conviction. And conviction can be far more dangerous. Religion does not teach violence easily. It teaches it carefully, wrapped in language of necessity, framed as last resort, presented as tragic but unavoidable. This is how violence survives morality, by wearing moral language. Yet, even within religious traditions, this paradox is acknowledged. Texts are filled with tension, mercy and wrath, forgiveness and punishment, love and judgment. Religion reflects humanity's inner conflict, the desire to be compassionate and the fear of being destroyed. Holy war is not proof that religion failed. It is proof that religion struggled with the same reality as law and state. How do you restrain violence without losing power? When mercy threatens survival, authority chooses control. This is why religious violence often appears alongside political power, empires, kingdoms, expansion. Faith becomes identity, identity becomes territory, territory becomes something to defend, and defense quickly becomes aggression. But there is another layer to this paradox. Religion often preserves mercy after violence. It demands repentance, regret, cleansing. Violence is framed as exceptional, mercy as eternal ideal. This allows societies to fight and still believe they are moral. The paradox is not that religion is violent. The paradox is that religion tries to contain violence in a violent world, and sometimes fails. This does not make religion unique. States do the same. Laws do the same. Ideologies do the same. Religion simply makes the struggle visible. Mercy is taught because cruelty is easy. Holy war exists because fear is powerful. Both emerge from the same human condition. Religion is not a solution to violence. It is a conversation with it. Sometimes that conversation restrains. Sometimes it escalates. And perhaps this is the most honest conclusion. Religion did not invent violence, and it did not erase it. It gave humanity a language to argue with its own instincts. Sometimes that argument wins, sometimes it does not. And the fact that this paradox repeats across centuries suggests something deeper. The conflict between mercy and violence is not a religious problem, it is a human one. Religion merely reflects it, amplified, sacred, and unforgettable. Mercy, in theory, is universal. In practice, it rarely is. Throughout history, compassion has almost always had borders. Not geographic borders alone, but moral ones. We tend to imagine mercy as something that flows naturally, freely, toward all human beings. But history suggests otherwise. Mercy expands slowly. Fear expands instantly. In nearly every civilization, Compassion begins at the center and weakens toward the edge. Family first, then tribe, then community, then faith, then nation. Beyond that, uncertainty. This is not accidental, it is structural. Early humans survived by protecting small groups. Trust was limited, resources were scarce, strangers were unknown. In such conditions, mercy toward outsiders was not noble. It was dangerous. This survival logic did not disappear with civilization. It was inherited. Even as societies grew larger, moral concern grew unevenly. Laws protected citizens, not foreigners. Religious commandments applied fully to believers and conditionally to others. Empires promised peace within their borders and destruction beyond them. Mercy became membership-based. This is the uncomfortable truth. Most moral systems were designed to stabilize groups, not humanity as a whole. Compassion was a glue, and glue works best when it binds something specific. This explains a recurring pattern in history. A society may be deeply compassionate internally and profoundly brutal externally. Care for the poor inside the community, charity for widows within the faith, justice for citizens of the state, but outsiders, different rules. This is not hypocrisy. It is consistency within a limited moral circle. The philosopher's question is not, why were they cruel? It is, to whom were they merciful? Because mercy always answers a question, who belongs? Once belonging is defined, mercy follows automatically. And once exclusion is defined, cruelty becomes easier. This is why dehumanization is such a powerful precursor to violence. If someone is placed outside the moral circle, compassion no longer applies. They are not one of us. They are the other. History shows this pattern relentlessly. Enemies are described as less human. Infidels, barbarians, savages, traitors. Words matter because language redraws the boundaries of mercy. Selective mercy does not require hatred. It requires distance. The farther someone feels, the less responsibility we feel toward them. This is why suffering feels abstract when it happens far away. This is why statistics do not move us like faces do. Selective mercy is not cruelty, it is limitation. Humans struggle to feel compassion at scale. We evolved to care deeply about a few, not millions. Modern moral systems try to fight this instinct. They speak of universal rights, human dignity, equality, but instinct resists. Even today, mercy often follows identity. We grieve familiar victims more deeply. We justify violence more easily when it targets outsiders. This does not mean progress is impossible. It means progress is fragile. Expanding mercy requires effort, education, stability, security. Fear contracts mercy. Safety expands it. This is why periods of crisis often shrink moral circles. War, economic collapse, cultural anxiety. Suddenly, compassion becomes conditional again. The question then becomes, is universal mercy achievable? Or is it an aspiration that must be constantly defended against our instincts? Perhaps mercy was never meant to be automatic. Perhaps it was always meant to be chosen. Chosen against fear. Chosen against convenience. Chosen against identity. And this is why moral teachings return again and again to the same instruction. Love the stranger. Care for the outsider. Protect the weak. Not because it is easy, but because it is unnatural. Selective mercy is humanity's default. Universal mercy is humanity's challenge. And history suggests we oscillate between the two. The question is not whether humans are capable of mercy. They are. The question is how wide they are willing to draw the circle. And that circle, more than any law or belief, reveals who we truly consider hum. War does not begin with hatred. It begins with permission. In war, actions that would be unthinkable in peace become routine. Killing becomes a task. Destruction becomes a duty. Cruelty becomes procedure. What is most disturbing about war is not that people kill. It is how quickly killing becomes normal. In every major conflict in history, there is a moment when the language changes. Civilians become collateral. Deaths become losses. Orders replace names. War rewrites reality. It creates a new moral environment where actions are judged not by conscience, but by outcome. Soldiers are not asked to decide who deserves to die. They are asked to follow instructions. Advance, clear the area, neutralize the target. These words are carefully chosen. They remove emotion. They remove faces. They remove hesitation. In war, killing is rarely personal. It is delegated. History shows this again and again. Most soldiers do not enter war with a desire to kill, but they learn quickly what is expected of them. Training does not focus on morality. It focuses on efficiency, on speed, on coordination, on obedience. Hesitation is framed as danger. Thinking is framed as delay, and delay can mean death. So the system teaches something subtle. Do not think too much. Do what you are told. Over time, repetition dulls resistance. The first shot is difficult. The second is easier. The 100th is routine. Cruelty does not arrive suddenly. It is normalized. War also redistributes responsibility. No single person feels fully accountable. The command came from above. The order was legal. Everyone else was doing the same. This diffusion of responsibility is one of war's most powerful mechanisms. The soldier does not say, "I chose to kill." The soldier says, "I had orders." And history is filled with this sentence. From ancient battlefields to modern mechanized wars, the structure is the same. When violence is collective, guilt becomes abstract. When cruelty is shared, conscience weakens. War does not ask people to become monsters. It asks them to stop being individuals. This brings us to the deeper question, a question that refuses to disappear. Does a human kill because they are evil or because they obey? We often imagine cruelty as something driven by hatred, but war suggests something more unsettling. Cruelty can emerge without hatred at all. In many cases, the person pulling the trigger feels nothing, no rage, no pleasure, just completion of a task. This is where philosophy becomes uncomfortable, because it challenges the idea that evil requires intent. What if cruelty does not always come from desire to harm, but from absence of thought? In war, thinking is dangerous. It slows action. It creates doubt. It disrupts unity. So thinking is discouraged, not explicitly but structurally. Orders move downward. Responsibility dissolves upward. The individual becomes a function, a role, a uniform. When thinking stops, morality does not disappear loudly. It fades quietly. The soldier does not ask, "Is this right?" They ask, "Is this required?" This distinction matters because morality lives in the first question. Obedience lives in the second. When obedience replaces judgment, cruelty becomes possible without malice. This is one of the most dangerous conditions a society can create. A system where people act without reflection, where responsibility is outsourced, where conscience is suspended for the duration. War thrives in this space, and this is why ordinary people can participate in extraordinary cruelty, not because they are sadistic, but because they are efficient. Efficiency does not ask why, it asks how. This is the silent transformation war produces. It does not turn people into villains, it turns them into operators. And operators are rewarded not for compassion, but for compliance. The greatest philosophical danger of war is not violence itself. It is the normalization of unthinking action, because once thinking is suspended, anything can be justified. History shows us that the most destructive acts were often carried out by people who believed they were simply doing their job. Not rebels, not fanatics, but functionaries. This forces us to confront an unsettling truth. Cruelty does not always announce itself with hatred or rage. Sometimes it arrives with paperwork, with orders, with routine. And this is why war is so effective at producing cruelty. It does not ask people to become immoral. It asks them to stop asking moral questions. So the question returns, heavier than before, not as accusation, but as reflection. Does a human kill because they are cruel, or because they stop thinking? Perhaps the most frightening answer is, sometimes there is no difference. Because when thinking disappears, cruelty no longer needs intent. War ends loudly, but conscience returns quietly. When the fighting stops, when the orders fall silent, when the uniforms are folded away, something begins to move again. Not relief, not pride, but thought. During war, thinking is dangerous. After war, thinking is unavoidable. The mind, once occupied by survival, now has space, and into that space, memories enter. This is where conscience awakens, not as accusation, but as presence. In war, actions are justified by necessity. After war, necessity dissolves, and what remains are acts without context. The same hands that followed orders now sit in silence, and silence asks questions. Why did I do this? Did I have a choice? Who was I becoming? These questions do not arrive immediately. They wait, because conscience does not shout. It whispers. Philosophically, this is a crucial moment. During war, identity is external. You are a soldier, a unit, a role. After war, identity becomes internal again. You are an individual, and individuality carries responsibility. This is why trauma is not only psychological, it is moral. Trauma is not just fear remembered, it is meaning returning too late. In war, actions are stripped of meaning to make them possible. After war, meaning returns to make them unbearable. This is the paradox. The same act that was neutral during war becomes heavy afterward. Killing that was once framed as duty now appears as memory, and memory does not obey orders. Many who return from war do not speak. This silence is often misunderstood. It is not emptiness, it is containment. Language struggles to hold what conscience now sees. How do you explain actions that were necessary then but impossible now? Society often expects closure, medals, ceremonies, narratives. But conscience resists neat endings, because conscience is not interested in victory, it is interested in truth. Philosophically, conscience returns when coercion disappears. When the pressure to obey is gone, judgment resumes. And judgment does not come from law or religion, it comes from the self. This is why post-war trauma often includes guilt without crime, regret without clear blame. The individual asks not, was it legal, but was it me? This question has no easy answer. During war, the self is fragmented. Part of it acts, part of it sleeps. After war, the parts reunite, and reunification is painful. This is why some avoid thinking, why they seek noise, work, substances, distraction, because thinking reopens the wound. But silence does not heal conscience, it only postpones it. Philosophically, trauma can be understood as the mind's refusal to let cruelty remain normalized. It is the return of moral gravity. War temporarily suspends conscience for survival. Trauma is conscience reclaiming its place. This does not mean the individual is evil, it means they are human. If someone felt nothing after war, that would be the anomaly. Pain after violence is not failure, it is evidence that morality survived. Yet society often misunderstands this. It demands strength, forgetting, moving on. But conscience does not move on, it circles. This is why some wars never truly end. They continue quietly inside those who lived them. And here lies a final philosophical thought. If war required humans to stop thinking, then trauma is the cost of thinking again. The price of obedience is paid later, in reflection. The mind reclaims what was suspended. The self asks to be whole again. This is not weakness, it is restoration. And perhaps this is the deepest irony of war. It demands the silence of conscience to function, and then leaves individuals alone to listen to it afterward. In this sense, trauma is not the enemy of peace. It is peace arriving too late, because peace is not only the absence of war, it is the return of thought. And thought always asks what obedience once forbade. Who was I? When I stopped thinking. Alone, humans hesitate. Together they move. This is one of the oldest patterns in history. Cruelty rarely begins in isolation. It accelerates in groups. When individuals gather, responsibility thins, not because people become evil, but because they become many. In a crowd, no one feels fully accountable. The voice inside that asks, "Is this right?" is drowned out by another question, "Is everyone else doing it?" Philosophically, this is a crucial shift. Morality is internal. Belonging is external. And in moments of tension, external forces often win. Humans are social beings. Survival once depended on the group. Exile meant death. Belonging meant safety. This ancient instinct never disappeared. It learned new forms. In a crowd, agreement feels like truth, not because it is right, but because it is shared. This is why crowds create confidence even when they are wrong. Doubt feels lonely. Certainty feels collective. Conscience requires solitude. It needs distance, reflection, silence. Crowds provide none of these. In groups, thinking becomes risky. To question is to disrupt. To hesitate is to separate, and separation feels dangerous. So individuals surrender judgment not through force, but through comfort. Comfort in numbers, comfort in sameness, comfort in shared direction. This is how conscience fades, not abruptly, gradually. First, responsibility is shared, then it is diluted, then it disappears. The individual no longer says, "I am doing this." They say, "We are doing this, and we feel safer than I." History shows that crowds do not need hatred to become violent. They need permission. Permission from authority, permission from peers, permission from silence. Once permission exists, restraint feels unnecessary. The crowd does not ask whether an act is cruel, it asks whether it is normal. Normality replaces morality. This is why public violence spreads quickly. Applause replaces hesitation. Cheering replaces doubt. The individual sees others watching, laughing, approving. And approval is powerful. In this environment, cruelty feels justified not by logic, but by belonging. Philosophically, the crowd does something subtle. It replaces conscience with consensus. Consensus feels objective. It feels external, reliable, safe. But consensus does not ask moral questions. It only asks for alignment. This is why crowds are capable of acts individuals would never commit alone. The crowd removes the burden of being the first, of being the last, of being different. And difference is where conscience lives. There is another layer to this silence. Crowds compress time. They create urgency. Now, act, move. Urgency leaves no room for reflection, and reflection is conscience's language. The faster the crowd moves, the quieter conscience becomes. This is why violence spreads fastest when events feel overwhelming. War, revolution, moral panic. In such moments, thinking feels like betrayal. The crowd demands loyalty, not wisdom. Yet, crowds do not last forever. Eventually, they dissolve. And when they do, individuals remain. This is when conscience returns. Often too late. The same person who shouted with the crowd now whispers alone. This creates a painful split. How could we do that? Becomes, how could I do that? Philosophically, this reveals something profound. Crowds do not erase conscience. They suspend it, and suspension always ends. This is why societies fear reflection after mass violence, because reflection assigns responsibility where crowds erased it. This is also why remembrance is dangerous. It forces individuals to reclaim what they delegated. History is full of crowds, but guilt is always individual. And perhaps this is the final insight. Cruelty does not require monsters. It requires coordination. When conscience depends on solitude and belonging depends on agreement, the crowd almost always wins, temporarily. But when the noise fades, conscience returns, asking what the crowd once silenced, not angrily, not loudly, but persistently. And that persistence is what keeps humanity from fully losing itself. Is cruelty a personal choice or a contagion? We like to believe that cruelty is a decision, that someone wakes up and chooses to be violent, that harm begins with intention. This belief is comforting, because if cruelty is a choice, then it belongs to them, not to us. But history complicates this idea. Again and again, cruelty spreads faster than intention. People who would never act alone participate together. People who hesitate individually move confidently in groups. This forces us to ask a more unsettling question. What if cruelty behaves less like a decision and more like an infection? Not biological, but psychological. Cruelty often travels through proximity, through language, through repetition, through normalization. When violence is witnessed repeatedly, it loses its shock. When cruelty is justified often enough, it gains logic. When harm is shared, it feels lighter. This is how contagion works, not by force, but by exposure. In this sense, cruelty rarely begins with desire to hurt. It begins with permission given by authority, by peers, by silence. Once permission exists, resistance feels unnecessary. But contagion alone is not the full story. Cruelty still requires participation. No one is dragged entirely against their will. At some point, a hand moves, a voice agrees, a step is taken. This is where responsibility returns. Cruelty is not purely imposed, nor is it purely chosen. It lives in the space between. Philosophically, this is the danger. When cruelty feels contagious, individuals stop guarding themselves. I didn't choose this, they say. It was the situation. It was the crowd. It was the time. These explanations are not lies, but they are incomplete, because contagion does not remove agency. It dilutes it. Responsibility becomes thinner, but it does not disappear. History shows that even in the most violent systems, some refuse, some resist, some step back. This proves something crucial. Cruelty is never inevitable, but resistance is costly. It risks isolation, punishment, exile. So most people adapt, not because they approve, but because they endure. This is why cruelty spreads more easily than compassion. Compassion isolates, cruelty unites. In moments of fear, belonging feels safer than morality. This makes cruelty feel external, as if it arrived from the outside, as if it infected the group. But contagion needs hosts. Cruelty spreads because humans are social, because we mirror behavior, because we seek alignment. This does not make humans evil. It makes them responsive. The most dangerous cruelty is not the one driven by rage. It is the one carried out calmly by people who believe they are simply adapting. So the question remains, is cruelty a choice, or is it contagious? Perhaps it is both. It begins as exposure. It grows through imitation. It solidifies through obedience. And at each stage, a choice exists, but becomes harder to see. Cruelty is most powerful when it hides the moment of choice, when it feels normal, when it feels shared, when it feels inevitable. This is why history repeats itself, not because humans forget morality, but because they forget when they stopped choosing. And this leads us to the most difficult realization. Preventing cruelty is not only about condemning actions, it is about recognizing how easily we absorb them. If cruelty were only a personal flaw, we could isolate it. But if it is contagious, we must guard against environments that spread it. Language matters. Rituals matter. Silence matters. Because cruelty rarely arrives screaming. It arrives normalized. And perhaps the final truth is this: cruelty becomes unstoppable not when people choose it, but when they stop noticing that they are choosing at all. That is when infection feels like fate, and that is when history quietly prepares to repeat itself. Why some do not become infected: individual conscience and inner boundaries. If cruelty can spread, then resistance must also be possible. History proves this quietly. In the same wars, under the same orders, within the same crowds, some people stop, they hesitate, they refuse, they step aside. This is not because they are braver or purer or morally superior. It is because something inside them does not dissolve. Philosophically, this raises a crucial question. Why do some individuals remain untouched by environments that overwhelm others? The answer is not found in ideology. It is found in inner boundaries. An inner boundary is not a rule imposed from outside. It is a line drawn within, a line that says, beyond this point, I am no longer myself. Most systems rely on the absence of this line. They assume people will adapt, conform, adjust, and most do, but some do not. Because for them, obedience has a cost that feels higher than punishment. Their conscience is not louder, it is closer. For many, conscience is abstract, a concept, a belief. For some, it is intimate, a presence. It does not shout, it does not argue, it simply refuses to disappear. These individuals do not see cruelty only as harm to others. They experience it as harm to the self. This distinction matters. When cruelty threatens identity, not just morality, adaptation becomes impossible. Philosophically, this is the difference between external ethics and internal integrity. External ethics depend on rules. Internal integrity depends on coherence, on being able to live with oneself. Many people can say, I had no choice. Some cannot, because the act itself breaks something irreparable. These individuals are not immune to fear. They feel it deeply, but fear does not override their sense of self. They would rather suffer consequences than become someone they cannot recognize. This is not heroism, it is alignment. Their actions match their inner image, and once that image is threatened, the system loses its grip. History shows that resistance often begins quietly, not with speeches, not with rebellion, but with refusal. I won't do this. I won't look away. I won't participate. Such refusals rarely change systems immediately, but they preserve something essential. They preserve the idea that cruelty is not inevitable. Inner boundaries are often formed early, through witnessing injustice, through early responsibility, through experiences of vulnerability. People who have felt powerlessness sometimes recognize it in others, and recognition interrupts contagion. Another factor is distance from authority. Those who do not fully identify with the group, the nation, the ideology, are less likely to surrender judgment. Belonging amplifies obedience. Partial belonging preserves thought. This is why outsiders, dissenters, and quiet skeptics often resist first. They already live with a degree of separation. Philosophically, conscience thrives in distance. Distance from noise, distance from urgency, distance from collective certainty. The crowd compresses time, the individual expands it. Those who resist often slow down. They think when others rush. Slowness is dangerous in violent systems, which is why such systems punish reflection. Another crucial element is moral imagination, the ability to see the other as a full human being, even when language tries to erase them. Once someone imagines the other's inner life, cruelty becomes harder, not impossible. but heavier. Contagion depends on abstraction. Targets, numbers, labels. Conscience depends on specificity. A face, a name, a moment. This is why those who resist often speak later of a single image. A look, a voice, a silence. Something that made cruelty personal again. But resistance comes at a price. Isolation, ridicule, punishment. This is why not everyone resists. Not because they lack conscience, but because they lack protection. Inner boundaries are costly when outer structures reward obedience. So the question is not why some fail to resist. The question is how some manage to. And the answer seems to be this. They protect something inside that systems cannot replace. An image of who they are. A sense of self that does not bend easily. This self is not rigid, it is fragile, but it is guarded. Once it breaks, adaptation becomes easy. Once it holds, cruelty loses its efficiency. Perhaps this is the deepest insight. Cruelty spreads fastest where identity is flexible. Resistance survives where identity is anchored. Not anchored in ideology, not anchored in pride, but anchored in a quiet understanding. There are things I can lose and things I cannot. History remembers revolutions and wars, but it is held together by these quiet refusals, because every system of cruelty depends on participation, and participation always has an edge where someone can step back. Those who do not stop history. In the modern world, cruelty rarely arrives with blood on its hands. It arrives with images, with headlines, with screens. We no longer need to stand in a crowd to feel the pull of collective behavior. The crowd now lives in our pockets. Screens compress distance. They allow us to witness suffering without sharing space, without sharing risk, without sharing responsibility. This changes the moral experience entirely. In the past, cruelty demanded proximity. You had to see faces, hear voices, smell fear. Distance made cruelty difficult. Today, distance makes cruelty easy. Violence no longer requires presence. A drone operator does not hear screams. A policymaker does not see bodies. A viewer scrolls past devastation between advertisements. This is not indifference, it is design. Modern systems separate action from consequence, and separation weakens conscience. When harm is mediated through screens, it becomes abstract. Numbers replace names. Statistics replace stories. Images replace encounters. The mind adapts. What once shocked now barely registers. What once demanded response now becomes content. This is how cruelty spreads without anyone feeling cruel. The modern individual rarely chooses violence directly. Instead, they absorb it passively. Repeated exposure creates familiarity. Familiarity creates tolerance. Tolerance creates silence. And silence is permission. Media rarely tells us what to feel explicitly. It tells us what to see repeatedly. And repetition shapes perception more powerfully than argument. When suffering is constant, empathy becomes selective. Not because people stop caring, but because caring without action becomes exhausting. So the mind protects itself. It narrows compassion. It filters attention. It disengages. This disengagement is not cruelty, but it prepares the ground for it. Modern cruelty spreads through normalization, not command. There is no order to hate, no instruction to dehumanize, only framing. Language becomes crucial. Victims become targets. Deaths become necessary losses. Violence becomes security. This language travels fast, faster than reflection, faster than empathy. Social media accelerates this process. Algorithms reward emotion, not understanding. Outrage spreads faster than nuance. Fear spreads faster than context. This creates moral urgency without moral depth. People react together. They condemn together. They justify together. They move on together. The crowd no longer gathers in squares. It gathers in timelines. And timelines do not pause. Modern cruelty is contagious because it feels indirect. No single person causes harm. Everyone is just reacting, sharing, commenting, agreeing. Responsibility dissolves into engagement. "I didn't do anything" becomes the defining sentence of modern cruelty. Yet influence accumulates. Narratives harden. Enemies are simplified. Complexity disappears. Distance removes friction, and friction once slowed violence. When you do not see the person you harm, your imagination must do the work. But imagination weakens under constant stimulation. This is why modern cruelty often feels calm, rational, justified. It lacks the rage of mobs. It has the tone of inevitability. Nothing can be done. That's just how the world is. It's complicated. These phrases anesthetize conscience. Modern systems do not ask people to be cruel. They ask them to be efficient, informed, realistic. And realism often excludes empathy. The most dangerous feature of modern contagious cruelty is its invisibility. People still believe they would never participate in harm because participation no longer looks like action. It looks like scrolling. This does not mean modern humans are worse. It means cruelty has adapted to new conditions. Where fear once enforced obedience, now speed does. Where authority once commanded, now algorithms guide. And where crowds once shouted, now they click. Yet the philosophical core remains unchanged. Cruelty spreads when individuals feel distant from consequences. Distance dulls responsibility. Speed suppresses thought. Repetition erodes resistance. Modern contagious cruelty thrives on these conditions. But this also reveals where resistance must begin, with slowness, with attention, with rehumanization. To pause is an act of defiance. To imagine the other fully is an act of resistance. The modern world does not lack mercy. It lacks space for mercy. And without space, conscience cannot breathe. So the question today is not whether cruelty is contagious. It clearly is. The question is whether we are willing to interrupt the conditions that allow it to spread unnoticed. Because cruelty no longer needs hatred. It only needs distance. And distance, unlike hatred, feels harmless, which makes it far more dangerous. When we imagine evil, we often picture something dramatic, a raging monster, fueled by hatred, driven by sadistic desire, loudly announcing its cruelty as if harm must always come from a dark personality or an obvious intention to destroy. But history repeatedly offers a more unsettling possibility, that evil does not always arrive as a scream, that it does not always declare itself as wickedness, and that it can emerge quietly, not from a violent explosion of emotion, but from a vacuum where thinking retreats. Because a human being can become cruel not only through hatred, but through habit, not only through desire, but through mechanical repetition, not only by saying, "I want this," but by taking refuge in the calm, disarming sentence, "This is what I was told to do." The absence of thought does not mean stupidity, and it does not mean ignorance. It means something far more dangerous and far more ordinary. It means that a person no longer examines their actions from the inside, no longer pauses to ask even once, "What is this? What am I doing? Who does this touch? What am I allowing to become normal?" And instead postpones the moral question as if conscience were something that could be scheduled for later. In that condition, the small inner voice that says, "Stop," begins to fade, not because it died naturally, but because the outside world is loud with procedures, ranks, forms, routines, crowds, and the heavy comfort of togetherness, and because belonging can feel so protective that the individual conscience, afraid of being alone, chooses silence. This is the moment when evil can appear not as a deliberate bad choice, but as an environment in which choice becomes psychologically invisible. The options still exist, but the system moves so fast and the pressure to conform feels so normal that pausing begins to feel dangerous. Questioning begins to feel like troublemaking. thinking begins to feel like delay, and delay begins to feel like risk. And systems, whether in war, dictatorship, or even ordinary bureaucracy, often feed this condition by separating action from consequence, by hiding reality behind language that turns people into targets, pain into operations, death into necessary measures, and by distancing the individual from faces, voices, and specific suffering, because the strongest nourishment of conscience is precisely this: the ability to see the other as fully human. At that point, evil does not require hatred. It can be produced by distance, by repetition, by official language, by obedience, and by the quiet psychological relief of feeling like a function rather than a person. The individual may not experience themselves as cruel at all, because they experience themselves as someone doing a job, following procedure, applying the rules. And the most dangerous sentence is born exactly here: what else could I have done? That sentence is not always a lie, but it is often an incomplete truth, because there is always a first act that remains possible even under pressure. The act of thinking, the act of pausing long enough to let the moral question breathe, the act of asking oneself, without drama, without heroism, am I beginning to accept this as normal? Because evil often lives precisely where questions die. When questions remain, conscience stays partially open. When questions vanish, the ordinary becomes acceptable. And history's heaviest outcomes are frequently built not on spectacular cruelty, but on this slow, incremental normalization, where a person first overlooks something small, then becomes used to it, then calls it normal, then defends it, and later struggles to recognize themselves, not because they remember choosing evil, but because they remember simply going along. This idea is not meant to condemn humanity. It is meant to protect it, because if evil can grow from the absence of thought, then resistance does not always begin with grand heroism, but with something deceptively simple and profoundly difficult: slowing down, thinking, questioning, and refusing to let the phrase, "everyone is doing it," become the final authority inside your own mind. If you destroy by pressing a button, is it less cruel? Once, to kill, you had to be close. Close enough to see a face, close enough to hear breathing, close enough to feel resistance. Violence was physical, heavy, impossible to ignore. And that closeness forced a confrontation, either with cruelty or with hesitation. In traditional violence, conscience had nowhere to hide. There was no distance to soften reality. What the hands did, the mind could not deny. Today, violence often looks different. You sit in a room, you look at a screen, you press a button, and somewhere far away, out of sight, out of sound, something collapses. There is no scream, no smell, no eye contact, only data, only confirmation, only result. This raises an uncomfortable question. If you do not feel the destruction, is the destruction less real? If you do not see the pain, is the pain reduced? Traditional violence demanded the body. Modern violence removes it. Technology steps in between. This distance is not only spatial, it is moral. Once a person said, "I did this." Now they say, "The system did." It was protocol. I only pressed the button. Do these sentences make the act less cruel? No. They make it lighter to carry. Cruelty does not disappear. It is redistributed, split between designers, operators, commanders, and screens. In direct violence, responsibility is concentrated. In remote violence, responsibility is diluted, and dilution changes experience. When violence is distant, it feels cleaner, more controlled, more rational, less emotional. But emotion was never the measure of harm. Absence of feeling does not equal absence of suffering. A wound does not bleed less because it was caused by a machine. A death is not gentler because it was delivered digitally. The cruelty lies not in proximity, but in consequence. Yet distance alters something crucial. It weakens resistance. It is harder to stop what you do not fully feel. It is easier to repeat what does not disturb you. This is why modern violence can be continuous, routine, scheduled. Pressing a button requires less courage than facing a person, but it also requires less reflection. Traditional cruelty confronted the self. Modern cruelty bypasses it. This does not make modern humans worse. It makes cruelty more efficient. Efficiency removes friction. Friction once slowed harm. When killing becomes a task and destruction becomes a metric, the moral weight shifts from action to outcome. Did it work? Replaces should it have been done. This is the true danger. Not that violence is easier, but that it feels normal. So is pressing a button less cruel than striking with one's own hands? Perhaps it is not less cruel. Perhaps it is less visible. And what is less visible is easier to accept, easier to justify, easier to repeat. Cruelty does not always grow louder with distance. Sometimes it grows quieter, and quiet cruelty is the hardest to resist. Because when violence no longer looks violent, conscience struggles to recognize it. This is why the question matters, not to judge technology, but to examine ourselves. Because the most dangerous cruelty is not the one we feel. It is the one we no longer notice. And when harm feels distant, the button feels small, but the consequence never is. This video does not say that humans are cruel and unchangeable. It does not claim that violence is our destiny, or that history proves we are broken beyond repair. It does not ask you to lose hope or to look at humanity with bitterness. This video says something quieter. It says that humans are fragile, and that fragility is not a failure. Humans feel fear. Sometimes that fear is loud. Sometimes it hides behind confidence. Sometimes it disguises itself as strength. Humans experience hunger. Not only hunger for food, but hunger for safety, for certainty, for belonging, for a tomorrow that feels secure. Humans fear being alone, and to avoid that loneliness, they sometimes silence their own doubts, their own questions, their own inner voice. Humans obey because obedience feels easier, because obedience reduces responsibility, because obedience offers comfort in numbers. And sometimes, when fear, hunger, and obedience come together, we call the result cruelty. But cruelty in these moments is not always intention. Very often it is a consequence. This video does not say that humans always choose wisely. It says that humans often choose under pressure. And under pressure, choices narrow. Time shortens, alternatives disappear. Reflection feels dangerous. The harsh moments we see in history, the silences, the obedience, the harm, they can feel distant, but they are not foreign. They live inside the human condition. This video is not here to accuse you. It is not here to demand sides. It is here to slow you down just a little, because sometimes humans harden not because they are cruel, but because they are exhausted. Sometimes humans withdraw not because they lack empathy, but because they are overwhelmed. Sometimes humans stay silent not because they agree, but because speaking feels unsafe. And none of this makes a person monstrous. It makes them human. This video says that if we define people only by their worst moments, we will never truly understand them. If we look only at outcomes, we will miss the conditions that shaped them. Understanding is not excusing. Understanding is the first step toward not repeating. This video is not meant to leave you heavy. It is not meant to trap you in dark thoughts. It is meant to remind you gently that the very fact you are asking these questions, that you are willing to look at history without judgment, that you are able to pause and reflect, already matters. Cruelty often survives where thought disappears, and thought, even quiet thought, slows it down. This video does not say that humans cannot change. It says that humans change with conditions, and conditions can be changed. Sometimes that change is not dramatic. Sometimes it is not heroic, sometimes it is just a pause, a breath, a moment of awareness. If this video has slowed you even slightly, if it has moved you toward understanding rather than blame, if it has made you look at people with a little more patience, then it has done what it needed to do. History is loud, but change often begins quietly. This video does not ask you to be a hero. It simply asks you to remain human, because sometimes the greatest resistance is not shouting. Sometimes it is simply thinking. And if that thinking does not frighten you, but instead brings a sense of calm, then you are exactly where you should be. This is not humanity's verdict, this is its story. And stories, when they are understood, become lighter to carry. Now, just for a moment, be still. Hold the question without judgment. Perhaps an answer is not required. Perhaps understanding is enough. Cruelty then and now, which is worse? When we ask this question, we often speak as if the answer is obvious. We say the past was more brutal. We say the present is more civilized. But history and the modern world are not arguing with each other. They are simply speaking different languages. In the past, cruelty was visible. It stood in public squares. It had sound. It had blood. It demanded attention. People knew what was happening. They saw it. They felt it. Cruelty was heavy. It was difficult to deny. It left no room for illusion. Today, cruelty is often quiet. It lives behind screens, inside distance, within statistics and summaries. It does not shout. It flows. And what flows continuously is easy to overlook. In history, people stood face to face with cruelty. Today, people stand one step removed, and that step changes everything. In the past, one either acted or refused. Today, one often simply watches, and watching is a form of participation, even when it does not feel like one. Historical cruelty was physical. Modern cruelty is psychological. One wounded bodies, the other numbs conscience. In the past, silence followed cruelty. Today, cruelty exists inside constant noise. Comments, reactions, debates, and this noise often overwhelms reflection. In history, cruelty required large, undeniable decisions. Today, it often arrives through small actions, a click, a share, a moment of indifference, and this smallness makes it dangerous. So the question begins to change. It is no longer simply which is worse. It becomes which one do we accept more easily. The cruelty of the past feels unbearable to us because it is exposed. The cruelty of the present feels familiar because it is woven into everyday life. In the past, people often knew they were being cruel. Today, people sometimes do not feel it at all, and not feeling harm can be more dangerous than recognizing it. This does not mean modern humans are worse. It means cruelty has adapted to conditions. In the past, cruelty was driven by fear. Today, it is driven by speed. Fear once forced obedience. Speed now removes pause. One crushed the human body, the other rushes the human mind. And in haste, conscience steps aside. In the past, cruelty lingered. Today, it disappears quickly, replaced by the next headline, the next image, the next crisis. What is forgotten is more likely to return. This is why the word worse requires caution. Historical cruelty was harsher. Modern cruelty is more diffuse. One left deep scars, the other creates widespread numbness. And numbness, over time, reaches farther. In the past, people sometimes felt shame after cruelty. Today, cruelty is often analyzed, discussed, and then left behind. And moving on is itself a decision. So the answer is not simple. The past was more violent in appearance. The present is more normalized. And perhaps the hardest question is this: is visible cruelty more dangerous or invisible cruelty? This video does not deliver a verdict. It only suggests history shows us what happened. The present shows us what we are willing to accept. And maybe the difference lies here. In the past, people lived with cruelty. Today, people sometimes grow used to it. And habituation is quiet, but quiet things take the longest to notice. So the real question is not, who was worse? The real question is, under which conditions do we lose ourselves more easily? History reminds us. The present tests us. And in both cases, the same response matters. To slow down, to think, to look again at what feels normal. Because cruelty does not always arrive screaming. Sometimes it simply becomes ordinary, and what slows it is rarely heroism. More often, it is attention. That attention is what connects past and present, not to judge them, but to recognize ourselves within them. Which is worse? Was cruelty worse when it stood in public squares, visible, undeniable, with faces watching and hands trembling? Or is it worse now when it hides behind screens, numbers, and distance? Was it worse when people had to look directly at what they were doing? Or is it worse when people no longer have to look at all? Is cruelty more dangerous when it is loud and shocking, or when it is quiet and familiar? Was it worse when violence demanded physical closeness, eye contact, presence? Or is it worse when a single button replaces a human face? When someone had to raise their hand, feel resistance, hear a voice? Was that more cruel than pressing a button and watching nothing happen on the screen in front of you? Is cruelty less cruel because it feels less personal? Or does feeling less make it worse? Was it worse when people knew they were doing something wrong? Or when they are unsure whether they are doing anything at all? Is cruelty more forgivable when it is driven by fear, or more frightening when it is driven by routine? Was the past more brutal because it left scars on bodies? Or is the present more dangerous because it leaves scars on attention, on empathy, on memory? When cruelty was rare but intense, was that worse than cruelty that is constant but diluted? Is it worse to witness one terrible act and never forget it? Or to witness thousands of smaller ones and forget them all? Was it worse when people were forced to participate? Or when participation feels optional, passive, almost invisible? Is a scream more terrifying than silence? Is violence more dangerous when it horrifies us? Or when it no longer surprises us? Was it worse when cruelty demanded courage, or when it requires almost none? When people once risked something to be cruel, is that worse than when cruelty costs nothing at all? Is a society more violent when it kills openly, or when it harms quietly and calls it normal? Was it worse when cruelty ended with silence, or when it lives inside endless commentary, debate, and scrolling? Is cruelty more real when it happens once and stops, or when it happens continuously and blends into everyday life? Was it worse when people felt guilt afterward, or when guilt never fully arrives? Is forgetting more dangerous than remembering? Is it worse to know you are part of harm, or to believe you are not? When cruelty is obvious, it can be resisted. But when it is ordinary, how do you even recognize it? Is visible cruelty easier to confront than invisible cruelty? Which one asks more of us? The past, which demands judgment, or the present, which demands attention? Was cruelty worse when people lived with it, or is it worse when people grow used to it? And finally, when you look at history and then look at now, which makes you more uneasy? What people did then, or what we accept today? And if the answer is not clear, what does that uncertainty say about us? Which is worse? And why does the question refuse to let us go? And which cruelty is still with us? There are forms of cruelty in history that are officially over. They have been abolished by law, prohibited by treaties, condemned by courts, labeled as the past in textbooks. We look at them and say, this no longer exists. This could not happen again. The world has moved on. But history is never that simple, because what ends in history is usually the event. What often survives is the way of thinking that made it possible. A cruelty can be outlawed, while the logic that justified it remains. A system can collapse, while the language that normalized it survives. A law can disappear, while the fear that demanded it stays alive. We often remember the past through images: chains, camps, execution squares, bodies, and we assume that cruelty lived only in those images. But cruelty does not live only in form. It lives in habits, in phrases, in rationalizations. Once history openly declared, "Some people matter less." Today, the sentence is rarely spoken that way, but it returns quietly in different words. They are replaceable. Their suffering is unavoidable. That's how the system works. The forms change. The sword becomes a button. The chain becomes a contract. The public square becomes a screen. But the idea of managing humans from a distance sometimes remains exactly the same. In the past, cruelty was often direct. People knew what they were doing. Today, cruelty is often fragmented. One person decides, another executes, another observes, another remains silent, and each one says, "I am not the whole. I am only a part. I am not the one responsible." History has heard these sentences before, and the outcome has always been familiar. Some cruelties no longer exist by name, but their shadow remains. That shadow appears in how we rank suffering, in whose pain becomes news, and whose pain becomes data, in which deaths are called tragedies and which are reduced to statistics. In the past, cruelty touched the body. Today, it often fails to touch the conscience. And perhaps that is the difference. We look back at history and ask, how could they allow this? But it is harder to ask ourselves today, what have we become accustomed to? What do we scroll past? What no longer surprises us? Because the most enduring form of cruelty is not the one that shocks. It is the one that feels normal. History shows us what happened. The present shows us what we are willing to accept. And these two are deeply connected. In the past, cruelty destroyed people. Today, it often numbs them. And numbness is cruelty's quiet ally. This does not mean that everything today is worse. It means that cruelty adapts to conditions, and adaptation makes it harder to recognize. That is why connecting past and present requires more than asking, what happened? It requires asking, how did it become possible? How did it become acceptable? How did it become ordinary? Because a cruelty truly ends only when the thinking that sustained it is questioned. And perhaps the most persistent legacy history has left us is this: the human ability to feel distant from responsibility. The past revealed this openly. The present demands that we notice it quietly. And maybe the thread that connects history to now is not technology and not law. It is a single question: is this normal? As long as that question is asked, history does not fully repeat itself. The moment it disappears, the past quietly returns, not in the same form, but with the same logic. And that is how history and the present remain bound to each other, not through identical events, but through familiar ways of looking away. Slavery, a system that ended, a way of thinking that remained. Slavery as a system ended. It was abolished by law, condemned by morality, written into history as something humanity claims to have overcome. We point to dates, to documents, to declarations of freedom, and we say, this is no longer who we are. But history does not end when laws change. Because laws can erase systems, but they do not automatically erase the logic that once made those systems feel normal. Slavery was not only chains and markets. It was an idea, a quiet, powerful idea, that some people could be reduced to tools, to labor, to resources, that their value could be calculated without reference to their inner life. This idea did not vanish overnight. It adapted. When slavery existed openly, it required justification. Religion, science, economics, Entire worldviews were built to explain why some humans mattered less. Those explanations have been rejected. But rejection does not always mean disappearance. Sometimes it means transformation. Today, no one openly says these people are property, but similar thinking appears in softer language. They are replaceable. There will always be more workers. This loss is unfortunate but necessary. The structure has changed. The assumption remains. Slavery turned humans into means, not ends. It trained societies to separate usefulness from humanity. That separation did not die. It moved. It appears in how suffering is distributed, in who is expected to endure more, in whose exhaustion is considered normal, in whose death becomes a statistic rather than a story. Slavery once relied on physical ownership. Today, control is often economic, legal, or invisible. But the psychological distance remains. The enslaver rarely saw themselves as cruel. They saw themselves as practical, as realistic, as part of how the world worked. This is the most unsettling continuity. Cruelty does not always feel cruel to the one benefiting from it. Slavery normalized indifference. It taught generations to look at pain and continue. That habit does not disappear easily. When systems reward efficiency over dignity, slavery's logic quietly survives. Modern societies pride themselves on freedom, but freedom is unevenly distributed. Some people have choices, others have necessities. Slavery removed choice entirely. Modern systems sometimes reduce choice until it barely exists, and the difference becomes harder to notice. This does not mean the present is the same as the past. It is not. But similarity does not require identity. It requires inheritance. The past leaves traces in how we think about work, worth, and disposability. Slavery taught the world that some lives could be spent. That lesson was never fully unlearned. We see it when dangerous labor is accepted because someone has to do it. We see it when suffering is tolerated because it happens far away. We see it when empathy stops at borders. Slavery was once enforced by violence. Now compliance is often enforced by survival. The enslaved had no alternative. Today, many have alternatives that are theoretical but unreachable. And so the question changes. Not, does slavery still exist? But, has the idea that enabled it fully disappeared? Because as long as societies accept that some lives must absorb the cost of comfort, slavery's shadow remains. History often comforts us by placing evil behind us. But history also warns us that ideas travel forward. Slavery ended as a system, but its deepest danger was never the chains. It was the habit of not seeing, and that habit is much harder to abolish. If we want slavery to truly remain in the past, we must do more than reject its form. We must recognize its logic when it reappears under different names, because the most enduring cruelties are not the ones we remember clearly. They are the ones we believe no longer exist. And history reminds us of this, not to accuse us, but to ask something quietly. Have we ended slavery? Or have we simply learned to look away more comfortably? If you're still here, it means you didn't come for noise. It means you stayed not for quick answers, but for questions that take time to settle. It means you don't look at history only to decide who was right or wrong, but to understand how things became possible. That is what this channel exists for. Not to judge humanity, not to defend it, but to understand it. History is often loud, full of wars, destruction, and shouting. But on this channel, we listen beneath the noise, because the most important truths are rarely found in the moments when everyone is screaming. If this video didn't make you angry but made you pause, if you're leaving not with a verdict but with a quieter question, then you are exactly where you should be. Here, we don't rush to conclusions. We don't look for easy villains. We look at people, their fear, their weakness, their capacity to adapt, and their capacity to change. If you want to keep exploring history this way, not as a list of events, but as a mirror, you're welcome to subscribe, not as a habit, not as an obligation, but as a choice to continue this kind of thinking. In future videos, we'll return to difficult topics with the same approach. Slowly, carefully, without shouting. We'll keep asking the questions that don't trend easily, but stay with you longer. If this video helped you slow down, even briefly, if it gave you space to reflect instead of react, you can like it. Not to boost numbers, but to support this kind of content finding its way to others who might need the same pause. And if these themes felt familiar, it may be because we all carry similar questions. We just don't always say them out loud. This channel exists to say them quietly, without accusation, without urgency, without fear. Stay here, not for the fast world, but for the thinking one. We'll meet again in the next video calmly. History isn't over. We're just learning how to listen to it more carefully.